It's hard to know exactly where to start because I have no idea what levels of awareness people have around community food security. But I think maybe a good spot to put a line in the sand is that we have a big crisis when it comes to food. If you think about it from an equity and justice perspective, in this country we have 4 million of our fellow citizens who have trouble putting food on the table, or they're missing meals so their kids can eat. There's tremendous, as you know, tremendous vulnerability in far too many of our communities across Canada. And when you look at it from a health perspective, pretty much in every province across the country, 50 cents of every dollar is spent on healthcare. And a big chunk of that money is spent on diet-related illness, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, cancers. So we have a big crisis there. And then if you look at it from an environmental perspective, in Toronto, the average food item that you buy in the city travels about 4,500 kilometers from field to table. And that has enormous environmental impact related to climate change. So we have some very, very big problems out there, and food is a through line connected to all of them. And so when it comes to issues of equity and access, which is where Catherine and I come out of, that's the field that we started in. The dominant response to food vulnerability in Canada, as our social infrastructure has been stripped away, has been the food bank. It's the way for 35 years we've constructed something where people will line up, get to the front of the line, and be handed not very healthy food. And so that's where I started, just to place me in this conversation, in 1998, in a very low-income neighborhood in Toronto. Culturally, very, very diverse, people from around the world. But they were unified by a lack of good jobs, social assistance rates that weren't supportive, housing that was far too expensive. And as a result, they ended up coming to this door that we had in the neighborhood. And they would have to line up at that door, and because the door wasn't open very often. And once they got in, they would be asked many, many questions. Where are you from? How much money do you have? And then when you got through that, you would arrive at the front of the terrible fluorescent lights and paint falling off the wall. It was a very difficult place to be in. You would be handed a hamper of food that was never enough, that was not healthy, and that was not culturally diverse in terms of what their food needs or knowledge. So we have, this number that 1 million people use food banks in Canada, but we have this other number that 4 million people are food insecure. There are a lot of people who will just simply not go through that process because they don't want to check their humanity at the door and have to go through that and get food that isn't terribly healthy or reflective of their culture and never enough. But it didn't take a rocket scientist for us to figure out that that wasn't okay, that that wasn't sufficient. So we began a very long journey that started with a very simple thing, and that is to ask the community what they'd like. To make a very long story short, they were clear that they didn't want a handout. They didn't want to be poor. They didn't want to be treated like a number. But they wanted to cook. They wanted to grow. They wanted to volunteer. They wanted to participate in the life of their community and try to figure out how to build a better and healthier one that they felt good in. And so our story over the last 14 years and now in this new organization has been to respond to that, to create more participatory and less stigmatizing programming that allow people to come in to be cooks and gardeners and engaged citizens and volunteers all through this incredible thing called food, like the power of food, build skills and health and hope and sustainability. And another thing we never talk about in low-income communities, joy and pleasure. There's nothing more pleasurable than sitting down with others.
There's some results here in 3 areas. These are our 3 priority areas: healthy food access, food skills, and engagement, and civic engagement. Last year at the stop, 10,000 at the table. That's in Perth, Ontario. Gives you a sense of a different scale. At the Stop Food Bank, 10,000 food hampers through the food bank, which was the original program and still remains there. People can get 1 hamper per month. 619 households served at the table. That's all in Perth. 26,000 pounds of seasonal food of the month produce purchased through the stop from local farmers. $14,000 spent on local sustainable food in Perth. And some numbers showing how much food is grown in the community gardens.
So one of the big things that we said right from the start is that the food has to be healthy. You have to draw, again, a line in the sand to say everything we do is focused on the healthiest food possible, because these are communities that desperately need the best food that's out there.
These are just some sample results that we get through our annual program survey. At the local, which is in Stratford, 75% of people in cooking and gardening groups said that they had improved their physical health. 75% at the stop last year said they were eating more fresh fruit and vegetables because of something they learned. 4% made healthy changes to their diet because of something at the stop. In the area of community connection and engagement, just a few sample numbers, 88% of people at the table in Perth said they feel like part of a community there. And that's something that we see uniformly, and perhaps one of the greatest values that we're helping to create, I think, with the community food center.
Qualitatively, the quotes that we pick up, just people saying how important the resource has been to them, is just kind of off the charts in terms of how transformative their interaction with the space has.
One thing about this place is it gives people a lot of hope when otherwise they would have none, and you can't live without hope.
We are in no way villainizing food banks. We are suggesting that there is a more progressive way to channel that compassion that is evidenced by the food bank response, one that is more preventative, upstream, solidaristic, and quite frankly political in terms of what we're trying to do. There is this awakening around food because of the issues, the crisis that I talked about, but that interest is largely driven by the middle class. They have the money in their pocket to participate in that kind of economy. What we're doing is to say, don't just be a food consumer, be a food citizen, because there's a bunch of regulatory and government-related things that are really key to ensure that everyone accesses the benefits of the good food revolution that is very much on today. So everywhere we go, people are doing extraordinary work in, like I started the conversation, in basements and plazas and crowded areas and just not enough funding, projects, living day to day. It's impossible to create change in the community when you are frantically trying to sort out how to survive from month to month to month. So our goal is to try and create 15 community food centers across the country over the next 5 years. And we'll provide these community food centers with program development expertise, fundraising expertise, metrics and evaluation that we're going to get into in a bit more detail, and shared policy opportunities and a pathway for a national voice. Not only do we want to build the community food centers, these 15, but we also want to support a movement of organizations that are moving more progressively around food issues, that are moving away from charity and the handout to all of the things we've been talking about, the skills, the health, the hope, the civic engagement.
So you can see in our strategic objectives that are shared by all community food centers and that they sign on to when they decide to partner with us, that there's this access element, the skills, knowledge, and behavior change, social isolation, and knowledge of poverty in the food system and opportunities to take action on poverty and the food system issues. We're calling them for now the good food principles. Nick mentioned the centrality of healthy food, and that the power of food to build health in communities, and that it's not, as it so often is, an incidental thing that you don't even have a budget line for, but you sort of take something off a truck and some donuts and some people drop it off, but an actual thing that is worth prioritizing, raising money for, and placing at the center of what you. People can enter into the center for a variety of reasons. Often they enter for an emergency, they're hungry, they need a meal or a hamper, but they stay for other things. And that's a huge, very pragmatic element of the food center, is meeting that immediate need and then being able to channel people into other things that they're interested in, a cooking program or gardening or civic engagement. Creating an environment of respect and community leadership underpins all of our work. We try to avoid those things that tell people this is a stigmatized environment, try to meet people where they're at, which is a basic community development principle that has a variety of aspects to it. It means thinking about what their barriers might be to participate and helping to address those barriers. Also touched on the fact that our sector is underfunded. We think we do valuable work. We insist upon making that point over and over again, that we need to aim high for our organizations and not be content to get the scraps, literally the scraps, and figuratively the funding scraps. Other organizations are better, other sectors are better funded, and we want to see respect for this work. And in return, we try to evaluate and to always look at a cost-benefit analysis of what we do and look at impact.
Part of our work is to create a rigor around what we're doing, to show the impact we're having on some of those health-related issues I talked about, the social isolation issues, etc. You know, our work is very, very valuable, and it needs to be respected, and it needs to be funded. And we need to say that and prove it on the ground. That's a big piece of our work.
Dans une région comme Montréal, comme Québec, comme la Montérégie, c'est assez étendu, avec beaucoup de personnes. Je me demandais la quantité de centres comme ça qui pourraient être nécessaires. Est-ce qu'on en retrouve un seul ou plusieurs? Est-ce qu'il y a des barèmes qui ont été évalués pour que les gens puissent avoir un milieu de vie quand même à proximité? Et ma seconde question, c'est qu'il y a beaucoup déjà des initiatives de démarrer un peu partout. On parle d'agriculture urbaine, on parle de cuisine collective, de dépannage, et tout ça est séparé et existe déjà. Alors, ma question est, est-ce que c'est possible d'avoir ce genre de continuum de services, mais qui ne sont pas nécessairement dans la même bâtisse?
Toronto, there are two, one in the northwest and one in the southeast. That seems to work for now. We're going to keep it at that.